All right, so my car broke down recently, and it's an old car. I'm gonna try and fix it, but it's been a lot of money, and I'm in that position where, like, it's not a good deal to put more money into the vehicle because I've already spent more than the vehicle is worth trying to keep it running. You know that game. And new cars are expensive, so it kind of sucks, but I think it's time I need to buy a new car. And I've been looking at cars and trying to decide what do I want. I like a lot of the newer features, but I also don't like cars yelling at me. I don't like cars driving for me unless I want them to. I don't like cars telling me what to do, basically. So I looked up, is it legal to disable safety features on my car, right? I don't want it to be beeping at me forever if I don't have my seatbelt on, right? Is it legal for me to hack the car and turn that seatbelt off? And I went to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT quickly scolded me and said, no, definitely not, just not legal at all. And so I got into a little bit of a legal theory with ChatGPT and asked it, where did this come from, right? In English common law tradition, were we always held at gunpoint by the government to building codes and laws about what I'm allowed to do with my own property? And am I allowed to disable things that are there for my safety or not? And ChatGPT did confirm that this is not inherent to English common law. This is a modern development. So I want to repeal the 20th century, including this political, legal doctrine of proactively protecting the public safety. I think it makes sense in some cases, but it has gone way too far. We use the policing power of the state, which means we hold people at gunpoint to keep them safe for their own good. And that's just not really the way that justice should work, right? What is the basics of justice? The basics of justice is you get rewarded for doing something good and you get punished for doing something bad, right? But when we adopt this preemptive, this proactive stance towards safety, we end up punishing people not for doing something bad, but for doing something potentially bad, right? When I disable the seatbelt warning in my car, the only actual change that happens at that point is that my car is less annoying to me personally as the driver. It has no tangible effect at that point on anyone else. Now, you could say in the future there's a potential for a passenger in my vehicle to not put on their seatbelt because they were not warned by the vehicle, and then to be injured because they were not wearing that seatbelt. And that would have been my fault, right? That would be my fault for disabling the seatbelt warning and leading to that passenger's injury. And I accept that. But that hasn't happened. That's a potentiality that has not appeared in reality. Not yet. So if the government were to punish me for doing such a thing that would create such an occurrence before it occurred, then the government is punishing me unjustly by the very basic theory of justice, which is to be punished when you do something wrong, to be punished when you are at fault. And the true fault here would be to cause harm on my passenger, but that harm has not been caused. And so if I'm punished simply for disabling the seatbelt warning, then I am punished for the potential harm, not for the actual harm. And that means the government is getting into the realm of insurance rather than the realm of justice. It is using the police power of the state, which should be reserved for cases of justice, and it is applying that police power to insurance, to ensure the public safety, which is not really traditionally what the government is supposed to do. And I could appeal to English common law, but even that, I think, is based on a Christian worldview. And God's law is set up this way. God's law is retributive justice, not proactive, not preemptive justice. God's law is simply, if you do X, then you receive Y punishment or reward. X equals Y. You created harm, you caused harm, you get punishment. Not you created the opportunity for harm. Now, there is a particular example that comes up a lot in discussions of this, and that is the Old Testament law of the parapet around a roof. Back in Middle Eastern, ancient Near East society, people hung out on the roof a lot. That was the gathering place. And so it was dangerous because people could fall off the roof. And so therefore, God put into the law that you should put a fence around your roof. Now, does God say the government should check for fences? It should be in the building code. You should not be allowed to build a home if you don't have a fence around your roof, a parapet around your roof to keep people from falling off? Absolutely not. No such regulation is put into God's law. But what God does say is that if you do not have a roof and someone falls off of your roof, then you are held accountable for that manslaughter because you did not see to the safety of your home. You created the opportunity for that. And I think that's very good. That is true justice. So if I buy a car and I hack it and I remove all the safety features and then my passengers or someone else on the road is harmed because of that action, I should be punished for that action. I agree with that 100%. But if I do it, if I just do it, and then I get punished for creating the potential of future harm, then the government is getting into the job of predicting the future. The government has stepped outside of justice and gone into social engineering. The government is trying to engineer safety rather than to enforce justice. And we have seen a million problems with this. This is not the way that the government should go. So if we talk about repealing the 20th century, then I think this proactive type of regulation should be repealed, because that's pretty much when this happened. I also talked to ChatGPT and asked, when did this happen? And it referenced this event, the 1911 factory fire in New York City. It was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory and killed 146 clothing garment workers, mostly young immigrant women. This disaster remains one of the deadliest workplace accidents in U.S. history. So what happened was, in 1911, we had this big fire that killed a bunch of people in this factory, and it was a tragedy. And as we see with tragedies, this caused a response. People wanted to say, never again. We should never have this thing happen again. Here, importantly, the fire broke out on the 8th floor of the factory, and people were trapped inside of the building. As you can see here, there's no way of escape. So fire escapes were something that were part of the response to this tragedy. Now, here's where we see what happened. A political event happened. The Ladies and Dressmakers Union, we see here, out protesting. And interesting here, look at this. We mourn our loss, the United Hebrew Trades of New York. Why are the Hebrews involved? That's interesting, right? So we have the women and the Hebrews here protesting, as well as other progressive humanists, trying to get safer workplace environments, right? In fact, I see some Hebrew on the store sign here. So what part of New York are they in? I'm not sure. But this this led to real changes. We can see here in the aftermath of the fire, a commission was established to investigate the causes and propose solutions. The commissioner's recommendations led to the implementation of new labor laws, including fire safety regulations, minimum wage, and limits on working hours. So this was a pretty pivotal event in the legal history of our country. I think it was just the catalyst that sparked a lot of change here. I think there were other sort of liberal progressive movements going on. We have the 19th Amendment giving women the vote just a couple years after this. So there were a lot of societal changes going on, and there probably were a lot of really inhumane work environments, factories. And I do believe that those things were wrong. There was true injustice happening in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. A lot of poor people were being exploited in new industrial ways that we needed to grapple with. It was not the same type of slavery and barbaric treatment that the world had seen before. The introduction of factories and industry created a new concern for protection and justice. But in our zeal to protect these immigrant women who died and others like them, we went too far. We gave the government powers of proactive justice. So it wasn't good enough just to punish the factory owners for creating an unsafe environment and allowing 150 people to die. We needed to change the world so that such a thing could never happen again. Many times when a tragedy occurs, the emotional response is to say, never again, and to try to engineer the world such that things cannot happen again. But this, unfortunately, is impossible. The utopian desire to do so comes from a hubris that says humans can engineer society and nature itself such that tragedy and death can be abolished, can never come back. And this involves a deification of human power and ingenuity that we still see today with the transhumanist movement and with folks like Brian Johnson saying, we're going to solve death and I'm never going to die. We still have a faith that human science and technology will be able to engineer every bad thing from the world. But us Christians don't believe that. We know that God is in charge and humans will never have such godlike powers. And I think society in general is starting to get over this idea. It's been over 100 years and we still have a lot of evil. And some of our very knowledgeable experts are doing really evil things, such as the transgender movement being universally accepted in the physician medical community. These experts have not solved all evil, and in fact, they are inventing new forms of evil. So even those who do not put their trust in Christ Jesus seem to be waking up. More and more seem to be waking up. And it seems to be the men. I don't think it is a coincidence that it was the women dying here, and then the women's union, and then the immigrants and the minorities and the Jews and others who went alongside of them that pushed this. It's a masculine thing to understand that the world is hard. It's a stoic masculine impulse to say that we have to accept tragedy and move on. And it was a weak thing. It was the teaming up of the intelligence and the empathy of women and weak men that led to such foolish utopian ideas that we have seen ravage the 20th century. The 20th century was full of utopianism, and hopefully realism is making a comeback, because I think realism is a masculine thing. But yes, that's my installment into the Repeal the 20th Century series here. We're going to abolish the 20th century, hopefully. And one thing that you might not think about as being part of that is this legal doctrine of allowing the government to engineer our society. The government should really only be there to enforce justice. So if something bad happens, the government should use the police power that it has to punish evildoers and punish the wicked. But it should not use its police power to engineer the world, to socially engineer public safety. Propaganda is another element of this. The government spends so much money in propaganda efforts to try to modify human behavior. It's not its job. The government should not be doing such things. If we want to do things as a society like that, we should use private means. We cannot use the power of the police to enforce our propaganda goals. One quick aside to that is that blasphemy laws are definitely a thing, and the government should prevent the public blasphemy of our God. But we're a while away from that. Once we get our Christian nation, we can talk about that.